Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Anne Livingston, and I'm the chair of the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's webinar, the focus of which is lifelong participation through digital technology. Our webinar today is facilitated again by Community Resourcing for the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. If you joined us for one of our previous webinars, you'd know that they are planned based on the feedback and requests we have received through our collaborative. The main focus of our webinars is to bring together local, national and international perspectives in research and development. These webinars are also focused on the deployment of smart assistive technology in the various care sectors. Community Resourcing is proud to have worked with a variety of international linkages, and we've been fortunate to work with many international projects and research entities throughout the years. You'll note in that our webinars that neither Community Resourcing or the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services are promoting or endorsing any particular product, research entity or organisation. Rather, the purpose of our webinars is to serve, to inform viewers of various smart assistive technologies currently in deployment or development and policy platforms and research occurring. Questions are definitely welcome through our webinar, but I will let you know that all microphones have been muted, so there are no interruptions in the recording of this webinar. If you wish to ask a question, this can be added to the question pane on the dashboard, which we'll see on the right of your screen. There will be an opportunity for your questions to be answered at the end of Dr. Mason's presentation, and I thank you for those who have already posted those questions. At previous sessions, we've been inundated with questions, so the earlier you post your question, the more questions we can respond to. In this webinar, Dr. Claire Mason will introduce her research with Data61 on lifelong participation through digital technology. Some of you will already know Claire as she has presented at other webinars that we've organised. And before I hand over to Claire, I would like to give you some background information on her career. Dr. Claire Mason is a senior social scientist who is working with Data61 CSIRO to research the various experiences that are associated with our increased dependence on technology. Her work is focused not just in the home, but on our jobs, education, and other areas of our life. Claire is a Doctor of Philosophy and has completed a Bachelor of Psychology with honours. As well as this, she has a variety of awards under her belt, including the Australian Psychological Award and the Dean's Award Faculty of Business, just to name a few. Claire's research has been published in numerous peer-reviewed journals, profiled in mainstream media outlets, and has informed both government and industry strategy. It's with great pleasure that I welcome you back, Claire, to today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you to those of you who may have heard me before and nevertheless lining up again to hear me speak. There will be a little bit of repetition of some of the findings I covered under the presentation on future of work, but hopefully there's still plenty of new things to hear about. So to provide some context, this research on lifelong participation came about because of the realization that globally we are at the frontier of significant long-term and broad-reaching forces for change, particularly in terms of rapid demographic aging and developments in digital technology. And we believe that to understand how these forces will affect us, we need to consider how they work in combination, and equally to respond to them, we need joined up strategies and initiatives. And because of the complexity of both of these domains, we believed it was important to capture input from very well-informed, high-level stakeholders across different sectors of our economy and society, from government, research, healthcare, technology providers, educators, community service providers, and more, to get their views on the opportunities and risks that lie ahead and how we might prepare for them. And so that's really what I'm covering in today's presentations, what we learned from speaking with those people. But to begin with, I'd like to provide a bit of information about what we already knew about demographic and digital disruption. So to begin with, this graph is showing how projections of life expectancy have been changing. Over the past 150 years, our life expectancy has been increasing by 2 years every 10 years. So most of us can expect to live 12 more years than our grandparents did. And if this trend continues, 50% of the children who were born in 2007 or later in advanced economies will live to be more than 100. In Japan, we're seeing population aging the first, and there are lots of ways in which it is being felt. Japanese centenarians traditionally received a silver sakazuki dish for drinking sake to commemorate their 100th birthday. It was a gift from the Prime Minister. And back in 1963, when the tradition began, 153 bowls were given out. But in 2014, the government realized they were going to be sending out 29,000 silver sake bowls at a cost of $2.1 million. And soon afterwards, the tradition was discontinued. So obviously, the impacts of longer life expectancy and an aging population are going to reverberate well beyond 20,000 or so silver sake bowls. A basic economic reality is that if we are living for longer, we either need to be saving more while we work, and let's remember 12 more years worth of saving than our grandparents did, or else working for considerably longer. And this imperative is strengthened by the fact that even with our increasing rates of workforce participation amongst those who are over 65, current population and workforce trends suggest that by 2050, our tax base will be nearly halved, which is to say that we cannot rely on the government to bail us out if we haven't been doing adequate savings. Then we have more rapid advances in digital technology. This graph is actually a logarithmic axis, which means that all the trends that you can see here are showing exponential patterns of growth. So the exponential growth in computing power, in the number of devices we have connected to the internet, the amount of data that we're generating. And at the same time, the cost of computational power has been decreasing at an exponential rate. And the key characteristic of exponential growth is that initially change seems manageable, but over time it really begins to accumulate out of sight. And experts on digital technology say that developments in this space are only just reaching the stage at which the impacts begin to accumulate. So, for example, the impacts of automation on Australia's labour market are yet to be felt. But to give you some idea of the potential scale, Oxford University researchers estimated that 40% of the work that's currently being done by human workers could be automated in the next 10 to 15 years. Now, a subsequent study from the OECD suggests that that might be more like 9%. What we can say pretty confidently is that these developments in artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to affect the way in which we do our work across all sectors of the economy. And whereas previously technology developments took away the most low-skilled and repetitive jobs, the work of factory workers and typists, that was a good thing in that we were generally shifting to more interesting and well-paid work. But it's not going to be the same in the future. Essentially, any job which is routine and rule-based could potentially be automated. We're talking about things like X-ray diagnostics, accounting, even writing newspaper articles, all judged to be automatable in the future. And the graph that I'm showing you now has got the 16 largest occupational groups in our labour force in Australia. I've got females on the left, males on the right. And what we're seeing with the bars is judged automation risk for that particular occupational group. So you can see sales assistants and sales people are the largest category of workers in the Australian labour force. And they're also judged to have very high vulnerability to automation because of things like online shopping, self-service checkouts, and vending machines, which can do the most basic roles of a sales assistant. The next largest group in our labour force is actually school teachers. And whilst this is a large group, their job is actually judged to be very low in automation risk. Because whilst interactive simulations can be used to support deeper learning, you can't do away with the need for human-to-human interaction to support the learning process. So the key point here is that digital technology isn't always going to take away your job. You want to be in a role where it complements what you're doing and actually makes you more efficient. How do we understand what kind of skills will secure our future employability? We've done some analyses which look at this. Essentially, we took 300 of the occupations in the Australian labour force, and we were able to link that with an ONET database coming out of the US, which tells us, we've had experts rate what skills and abilities are required in each of those occupations. And so by piecing together how the composition of the Australian workforce has been changing and what skills and abilities are required in each of those occupations, we can see how demand for skills has been changing over time. And as the graph I've just put up shows you, the areas of occupational growth are ones which tend to require communication skills. So whereas we hear so much about the importance of STEM skills, in reality, the more that we work with technology, the more what is valuable in the human worker is our ability to connect, to communicate, to understand, and to build relationships. These are the things that technology cannot yet do and isn't expected to do in the near term. So the more that we have those skills, rather than something like programming skills, the more we have the capacity to be valuable workers in the future. And I also want to show you a more detailed analysis of demand for STEM skills and how that's been changing over time. What you can see is the traditional STEM skills, and by STEM I mean science, technology, engineering, and maths. So traditional things like biology, physics, maths are actually showing very low, sometimes even negative rates of growth and demand. But more generic skills like the ability to think critically, to analyze systems, to interact with computers, those things are showing high levels of growth. So here is a takeaway message that to remain employable in the future, we do not all need to retrain as programmers. That's an enormous relief to someone like me. We do, however, need to be comfortable using technology. And so I think older people who have probably built up pretty strong people skills and who are at least comfortable working with technology in their current role should still have valuable skills for future employability. But the reason why we did this research is because we still believe there is a risk in this combination of demographic aging and digital disruption. Because whilst there is a lot of variability in attitudes towards an uptake of digital technology, it is nevertheless age which is the best predictor of our digital literacy. People over the age of 65 have the lowest rates of digital engagement. So they aren't so digitally literate, and if you recall, that is important for future employability. The other big problem is that they are less resilient to labour market shocks, by which I mean that when an organisation downsizes, it tends to be the older workers who are most likely to be made redundant. And on top of that, they are also less likely to find alternative employment once that happens. One study found that 96% of workers aged between 55 and 59 did not find alternative employment once they were retrenched. They have relatively little time in the workforce to justify retraining, so many people respond by retiring earlier. And arguably that's okay, at least for those people who've built up a good superannuation balance. That earlier retirement might free them up to participate in different ways, to care for family members, to participate in volunteer work, to take a more active role in civil society. But research from the UK suggests that you can deliver 100 online transactions for the same cost as one face-to-face transaction. And this type of economics is having an inevitable effect. The concern, therefore, is that people who aren't keeping up with digital technology are at risk of becoming cut off from a wide range of vital services and opportunities. So here is the problem as we saw it. Our ageing population and our longer life expectancies require that we remain productive and active for as long as possible. And then on the other hand, for older and less digitally literate Australians, this increasing reliance on digital technology seen across our society could actually result in them being less able to participate across the board. So that's why we did these interviews. And what we asked the stakeholders that we spoke with was 3 questions. First of all, how is this greater reliance on digital technology likely to negatively impact on our ability to participate in our society, in our economy, in later life? The second question was, what opportunities might it create? And the third question was, what actions and resources are needed to minimize these risks and maximize the opportunities? And we heard from 38 very high-level stakeholders, CEOs, presidents, general managers across transport, education, recreation, finance, the range of views. And what we heard in the main was that while developments in digital technology certainly challenge existing ways of doing things, they do open up new channels for participating that are in many ways especially well suited to the needs and aspirations of older Australians. Older Australians are less likely to be financially responsible for dependents and having to service huge mortgages, so they're in a good position to use the flexible income generating opportunities that digital platforms can offer. And they can use the technology to connect with people and causes that are important to them. So that perhaps our choices are not just between working the same way but for longer than ever, or becoming increasingly disconnected, disempowered and financially strained. Rather, several of our interview participants believe the opportunities are so great that we can redefine later life and do away with the term retirement. And when we analysed the examples they gave, we found that we could identify 5 mechanisms through which digital technology was supporting lifelong participation. And that's what I'm showing on this figure. You can see digital technology going through 5 boxes to get to greater opportunities for lifelong participation. So those 5 boxes are 5 barriers that digital technology breaks down, which are traditionally associated with older age. So one is that it minimises the impacts of physical and cognitive limitations traditionally associated with older age. The second is that it can bridge the effective geographic distance. The third is that it allows us to maximise the social, intellectual and financial capital that we build up over a lifetime. The fourth being, it helps us to access the information and education that we might need to keep up with changes and ways of doing things. And the fifth is the fundamental capability of digital technology, which is to help people make efficient connections. But you'll see there's another arrow at the bottom of the slide. And this shows the fact that digital technology can moderate all those factors, but it can't do away with them altogether. And where it doesn't, we can actually see some people heading for greater inequality and exclusion. So let me talk you through how our experts saw each of those processes working to give you a sense of why they were feeling enthusiastic. So first of all, many of the people believe that digital technology would reduce the impact of the physical and cognitive limitations associated with age, illness, and disabilities in a wide range of domains. So, for example, self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles will help people stay independent longer because you can go out and do something without having to wait for somebody to pick you up and escort you around. Or you can stay in your own home for longer rather than going to an institution because you can shop online when it's harder to get out and about. And you can use smart pots and pans and fridges, which remind us to turn them off or monitor our routines if we start developing early stages of dementia. Or we can use an exoskeleton like the one this woman is wearing to help us keep walking as our body gets a little weaker. And then in a digital economy, we have robots and automations which take away the repetitive and heavy physical activities that cause strain on our bodies at work. And as a result, we'll be able to work in roles for longer than we might have been able to previously. The second way that digital technology supports lifelong participation was by allowing us to connect and communicate instantaneously over almost any geographic distance. In the past, if you lived in a different city from your grandchildren, you just heard about things like your child's first swimming lesson. And now with an iPad and Skype, you can see it yourself and wave to the child in the pool. For older people living in remote areas, digital technology can address challenges associated with distance. Remote monitoring and sensing, like an armchair in your living room which monitors your blood pressure. And high-definition video conferencing means that you can access specialist care without travelling and age in your own home rather than in an institution. And then the opportunity to work remotely, which is relevant for both remote and urban people. Back when we lived in an agricultural economy, people worked on their own land and in their own homes. And it's really since we shifted to being industrialised and working in factories and offices that we have this separation of work and leisure as being in different times and different locations. And arguably, digital technology breaks that down again. Small businesses, rostering and freelancing platforms allow us to work much more flexibly and more independently at any place, any time. And what this means is that you can stay engaged in meaningful and even income-producing activity whilst staying connected with your other aspirations that you might have had for your retirement and later life. However, as I said, digital technology doesn't break down all of these barriers. And because it can't do that, there are some new risks. For example, that with this greater reliance on video conferencing and online services, we could see older people actually spending more time on their own than they have in the past. The other thing is that these independent work arrangements and freelancing opportunities don't have the same employment standards and safeguards that we value so much in Australia. And that's something that maybe we need to begin working on. And then we know that in this digital economy, many regional communities are not yet prospering because they lack access to the high quality internet connections, which allow them to access goods and services and markets online. The third effect of digital technology is allowing us to make better use of the networks, the expertise, and the financial assets that we build up over our lifetimes. Accessing goods and services online saves money and allows your money to go further. A recent study done by a bank in the United Kingdom found that the average person saves £744 a year by accessing these goods and services online. And then you can also generate money online using social trading platforms like Craigslist and Uber, where you can use your car to earn money, and Airbnb, where you can convert your spare room into a hotel service. There are also online platforms for freelancing, which don't just match you with pieces of work, they also provide standardized contracts. They hold payment in escrow to ensure that there's money to ensure that you get paid at the end of the day. And some of them even offer mediation services when there is a dispute. And then a digitally connected global economy offers more market niches to exploit, while you have sites and networks like Etsy and eBay and LinkedIn, which allows small businesses to sell their services and wares with very little outlay or risk. So you can see an older person whose hobby has always been something they did on the side, starting to earn money with that via a small business because of all these barriers being broken down to the markets. Again, digital technology can't do away with all the barriers. People on low incomes who have the most to gain from cheaper online goods and services are the very ones who sometimes can't afford the home internet. And of course, it's those people who are already well off and who have the skills and resources like the spare room with the harbour view, who have more to sell in the online environment. Attractive and well-paid freelancing opportunities are generally available for the well-educated and experienced professional, and less obvious and easy to find for the retirees who are less educated and perhaps need those opportunities more. Then we come to access to information and education. This has always been viewed as a means of transforming people's lives, and the internet really has opened this up to everyone. If your partner did all the cooking and you're suddenly living on your own in later life, you can look up a YouTube video to find out how to boil an egg and start cooking. You can also access specialist courses that allow you to engage with a new hobby or lift an existing hobby into an income-generating business. Or if you should wish to do so, you can now do a Harvard degree in cell biology with a particular focus on mitochondria, entirely free of charge should you wish to do so. But here too, digital technology can't break down all the barriers. Lack of knowledge can affect even your understanding of what opportunities digital technology creates and how it's relevant to your lives and aspirations. So that can be the very first barrier to accessing those opportunities that are online. And the MOOCs aren't driving universities out of business, because it's really only those people who are highly motivated and who flourish in an academic setting who are able to complete an online course without some form of human support. Finally, efficient connections. This is the ability to join and match people and interests in any domain. Participants in our research gave us examples of individuals who are now participating in international problem solving and environmental movements from their own living room, thanks to digitally enabled networks and platforms. The one that you can see here on the screen is Zooniverse. Here you can work with scientific researchers from Israel, the United States and Europe as part of a team of other volunteers who are all talking with one another via technology about a problem or an issue that's of shared interest. For government, because you can now use digital technology to identify people with a specific interest or concern, you can now work in partnership with citizens to communicate and solve a problem in the community. The downside in this space is that these efficient connections also bring with them new privacy and security risks, such as cyberbullying and scams. And the other thing that perhaps we're less aware of is these invisible algorithms that sit underneath all these platforms, whereby the results of our internet searches or the information and options that we see on our platform are actually tailored based on our individual profiles, which can result in actually narrowing our worldview and reinforcing existing differences. So while I perhaps haven't emphasized enough that our participants were most excited and mostly spoke about the opportunities that digital technology creates, nevertheless, each of the barriers that digital technology can break down is also a barrier to using and accessing digital technology. And that's why, for some people at least, we may actually end up making them more cut off from society in the future. And you can see how even within your own family, a grandparent who isn't engaged with technology can become left out because so much information is now shared between family members even via digital channels. Well, the great thing about the type of research I was doing is that I could also go back to those really high-level experts and ask them what we do about these opportunities and these risks. And their answers tended to fall into three categories. We need more literate, empowered, and active users of digital technology. We need new mindsets, and we need joined-up support. In terms of literate, empowered, and active users, what they meant here was they acknowledged that many organizations are providing training for older people to use the internet and other forms of digital technology. But their concern was that we don't just want to make older people comfortable with the installation of home monitoring via digital technology or just able to use Facebook. What we really should be doing, given the range of opportunities that now exist online, is making sure that they can too use digital technology to achieve their objectives, to solve problems, and to make their world or somebody else's world better. So we want this much more active and empowered way of engaging older people with digital technology. The second thing is that we need to be changing our thinking about aging, participation, and technology. So some people said we should ban the word retirement, stop making this distinction between work and leisure. We also might need to think employment and careers. In the future, we do think more people will be self-employed, and that requires a much broader skill set and willingness to take on responsibility. When we work in a large organization, we can rely on a wide range of support services, from technology support to contract management. When we work independently, we have to be able to identify our own opportunities, manage our own risks, and find answers to problems all by ourselves. The other mindset that we need to shift to is that we already know digital technology can disrupt industries. Now we need to think about the fact that digital technology really has the potential to disrupt the way in which we approach later life. But to achieve that potential, we need to support people to transition. And the first step in that is helping them understand the range of ways that digital technology is relevant in their lives and how it can help achieve their aspirations for later life. In particular, for workers whose existing roles are about to be disrupted by all this new technology, we need to give them information and support that helps them identify what new job roles they might be well suited to perform. And that's where things such as big data can really help us, by allowing us to identify where new job openings are occurring and matching people based on their existing skills profile to the right kinds of new opportunities. But our participants also argued that not everyone will be able to make this transition, and we need to think about how we can use the productivity gains of digital technology to support those individuals, maybe with a universal basic income, who are not able to make transitions to new roles. Ultimately, what we want to do is to make the best possible use of the extra years that our improved healthcare has given us and the capability that digital technology is going to offer in the future. And I think that challenge is best summed up by this quote, which I'll finish with, given to me by one of the research participants. She said, "The tools themselves are not the solution. It's the relationship between what the tools are and a deep understanding of how to provide the social good. Take a step back and think, what do we care about? What are our values? What do we seek to accomplish? What does science tell us for having a really good life? And then how can technology facilitate that?" So I hope that provides food for thought, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Claire, for a fabulous presentation. Very wide-ranging, and we've got a number of questions already posted. I'll start with our first one from Gemma. Gemma is a regional provider, Gemma, and she's saying, great to hear your comments about communication skills being highly regarded in the new technological arena. And she says, I'm concentrating my efforts with my staff on this very issue. Your presentation today was very valuable and reinforces the direction I'm going in.
That is fantastic. The only thing I would add to that is that it's really that combination of great people skills and generic technology skills that is going to be what everybody needs into the future. So I know I shouldn't be piling more on to you, because communications are in and of themselves a big thing to be improving, but ensuring that people with those communication skills are also able to use the technology is how we make sure that flows through. So good luck.
Thank you, Claire. And next one's from Marie. She's comments on community care workers generally in the main, depending on what research you're looking at, women, and they're late 40s, 50s, reaching retirement age in many respects. The work is somewhat physical in terms of lifting and active workloads. And she sees that there's great possibilities for the impact of automation, and that does seem high to most people involved in the community care sector. But have you seen any good examples where this is playing out?
The automation reducing the physical load, I guess, of the community services worker. Wow, that is a really good question. Obviously, somebody who's really out there at the cold face, and I have to confess I'm not sufficiently, because I guess we've been looking generally at how digital technology works across the sectors and not really drilling down to community services. The most obvious application, which really doesn't get at the physical work, but I think gets at the generally less well paid and shift work nature of this kind of thing, is the role of rostering platforms. At the moment, we think of rostering platforms as being the domain of a given organisation, and we think that in the future, especially with individualised funding arrangements for aged care and disability services, we need rostering platforms that are much more cross-organisation, so that we can help people be much more efficient in those home visits. Instead of having to only take people who are being managed within a given organisation, a rostering program that goes across organisations means that you can join up the different work packages better. And importantly, where you have two parents working and family responsibilities, it should allow people to manage rostering conflicts when one partner works for one organisation, another partner works for another. I know it's probably not exactly what you were looking for, but that's the bit I know about.
And I guess, Claire, in our experience, it's where some communities like Japan, with its super aging, with the lack of workforce, is actually motivating those workforces to consider automation more.
Yes.
And we would see, in our experience, we're seeing major changes in the way that community care is being automated because of the lack of a workforce rather than because of an existing workforce.
So it sounds like you can answer this question better than I can.
So robotics is an obvious, lifting and doing the manual, but also robotics in domestic assistance is something, and I think some of the research is showing some better quality of service delivery via automation than, in fact, the traditional workforces. So
I do think I could have a tireless and ever-patient robot to do my care rather than my children, who are going to be grudging and reluctant. I think it might be the way to go. They can just visit me socially.
Correct. I think we've probably only got time for one more question, Claire, and this is from David. David's been working on several digital inclusion projects, and this is obviously a big issue for us and through the collaborative. has been very active in the digital literacy space, particularly with clients, but also with staff throughout services. You mentioned flexible income generation as being a viable option for many older people, and you quoted a few of the areas, but is there any research indicating currently what some of those main areas might be?
Oh, well, I think aged care and disability services are really big. And I think it's a very different kind of role nowadays than it used to be. There's much more variety. We had people talking about tourism operators taking an interest in this space because they can provide respite care now that somebody on a disability services payment can choose how they spend that money. They're going to be using it in a much wider range of ways. So it might be, I just need someone to come in and help me get dressed so that I can go to work in my driverless car. It's a different kind of role, so I think it will hopefully create more variety in the nature of the work that you can do, but a lot of that work will still be in aged care, disability services and healthcare because that's the growth area. We're living longer, but we're actually much more subject to chronic health conditions, obesity, mental illness, than we were in the past. So that's a huge area. And education is another big growth area. So it's still very much a services sector, and that's the other reason why communication skills are so important.
Thank you, Claire, for your insightful presentation today. Before we depart, you'll see on the screen details if you would like to contact Claire directly, you can also contact her via the staff at the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. Just in terms of our upcoming events, we're soon to host a study tour of Singapore and Japan in conjunction with the International Congress on Smart Homes and Health Telematics, or ICOS, known to many of our participants in our webinars. And in this event, we're particularly going to concentrate on the impact that co-design, co-creation and living labs is having in the sector. The theme of this year's conference is design, and where participants discuss their experience in design, development, deployment and evaluation of assistive and telehealth systems, as well as ethical policy issues. If you're interested in that, you can contact projects at communityresourcing.com.au, who'll provide you with some more information. We've got a couple of upcoming webinars for the coming months, and they include Dr. Ian Hopperman, who's presenting a webinar on the endless possibilities of using big data to increase quality and productivity in community care. Rob Hanson, who's going to introduce his research on blockchain. And finally, Dr. Philippa Collins from the University of Western Sydney, who will present her webinar on co-designing with youth. If you are keen to participate in any of these webinars, be sure to keep your eye on the platform for dates and more information. Once again, thank you for participating in our webinar today. The webinar will be posted on our platform following this delivery, and you can see the details on the screen now. Thank you all for attending today's session, and I hope it's been beneficial. I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Good afternoon.